I want to start off, yeah, we're looking at work and how that relates to our life and to really how does it relate to what we call our self-worth. So as we think about work and then like what society kind of tells us, what meanings are attached to like what we do, how much we earn, what our education is or our training, all these different things. I want us all to take just a moment and think about this. If whatever it is that you do in your life for work, or if you're not working, maybe you're retired or unable to work, like where do we spend the bulk of our time? And I want you just to take a second and ask ourselves, like, what would I have to do in order to just love myself, like right as I am? So just take a second and kind of think about it. Like, what would you have to do to make yourself value yourself and see you as important and worthy? Now, for some people, this might be like a financial thing, like when I have $1 million in my rainy day fund that's just there, or maybe it's when I become the CEO of the company I'm working for. We have this idea in our society, definitely here in the United States, that it's kind of perpetuated by all of us, that our work is equal to our self-worth. But today I'm asking us to like consider like maybe flipping that around and seeing that we have an inherent self-worth. Like Gary talked about, Neil talked about, that when we relate to this self-worth, maybe when we recognize that we can bring that and then make the work worthy of ourself. So it's kind of just a flip of that whole thing. So starting off, there's a very simple definition of what self-worth is. And the definition I found that I like is a sense of one's own value as a human being. So when I asked this, to go in within and just imagine a little bit, like what would it take for me to truly value myself, to feel like I'm worthy? So what is that sense? What do we get that from? Now, it's interesting because, as I mentioned, our society, we've kind of gotten it screwed up, and it doesn't help that we have a term that's called, net worth, somebody's net worth. It's interesting if you Google somebody that's famous, just type in their first and last name, and then just wait. Google will give you a whole list of suggestions of what it thinks you might be Googling or might be looking up. And net worth is always one of those. But this net worth, it's based strictly on how much money they've acquired, how many assets, what money is expected to come in. If they were to cash out everything that they have, then that is their self-worth right now. And so it puts out this image that our worth as a human being is related to these external things that can be taken away like in a second. And another kind of drawback of that is, I think of like the Forbes 500 is the list of these people and their net worths and where they are, and each year it fluctuates. And I picture people that are titans in industry, eagerly looking forward to finding out if they moved up or behind, or how do they compare to this other person that maybe their rival. That this idea of net worth has encouraged people to end up basically hoarding financial resources, isolating, creating this idea of rugged individualism. It's the opposite of what we are as social beings. Like, we are communal beings. And so this, again, placing so much value and emphasis on how much we have, how much we've been able to acquire, it's against our deeper nature of what we know to be important. And one thing that as I talk about this, I know we all need money to live, and so I'm not saying that we shouldn't pursue money. It's we are definitely dependent on it in our current system, and some of us come from backgrounds or different walks of life that perhaps make it a little easier to get into that flow, that open doors may be a little easier than others. Certainly, as I mentioned, education earlier, that can open doors. and training. So I'm not at all saying that we don't, you know, place some value and importance on that, but we need to recognize that our self-worth is completely separate of that, or it should be. You know, it's individual to each of us, that sense of value that we have within. But for a lot of people, all we hear is what society has kind of told us, you know, from the time that we are, you know, are born and we start going to, you know, kindergarten and other school. People are asking, like, what do you want to do when you grow up? And quite often, you know, parents and teachers and others are quick to steer people like, oh, you don't want to do that. You want to do something like this to where you'll have money. You want to do this to be important. Not recognizing that there's a calling within each of us. So that's, you know, what we're being called to today is to recognize that our self-worth is completely independent of it. Our self-worth, if it's something that can be added to you or that can be taken away from you, then that's not what your self-worth is. That's something that is dependent. That's all out here in the world of effect. So this is our call this whole month as we lean into work as a, you know, to look at it from a place of wonder. We have this opportunity to shift how we see ourselves and what we bring to the world. So when we recognize that we are, you know, just by the fact that we are alive, that we are breathing, that we are, you know, sharing this life force through us, then if we endeavor to bring that knowingness to all the things that we do, then everything that we do takes on a whole new space of being, a whole new level. So with that, I'm going to use a story from my past. And I've told this story in different forms several times. And it was usually, you know, to emphasize like to be aware of the story that we're telling ourselves in our mind, our own, you know, perception of life. So when I had this realization that I am part of something bigger, that there is something within me that is inherently valuable just by being, it was, you know, back right before I found Centers for Spiritual Living and started learning about, you know, the science of mind philosophy. At that time in my life, I was waiting tables. And I was about 16 months sober out of the party lifestyle. And I thought I should be feeling really good because I was no longer, you know, causing problems in my life due to a substance. I felt like I should be, you know, living on cloud nine, but I found myself just really in a deep funk. And I remember, you know, pretty clearly, I was talking with some people at work, some coworkers that we were all waiting tables. And one of them expressed the sentiment that if I'm still waiting tables when I'm 30, somebody shoot me. This person was making it clear, like to me, that that was their perception of anybody that was doing the job that I was doing. And they said when they were 30, and I was standing here and I was about 37 at that time. And so I took that in. I'm like, oh my God, that's me. Like, I really am just like worthless. What am I doing? And it popped into my head like I'm 37, like this might be the halfway point of my life. And at that place that we were working at, it was a physically challenging job because it was all about volume. And so then I realized like, well, if I'm at the halfway point of my life, this job is only going to get harder as I get older. And I, you know, really felt and looked forward like everything from here is all downhill. And it was really like depressing and challenging to me that I felt this way. And so all these things that combined, I really did feel worthless at that point in my life. Like I had ruined everything, every opportunity that had ever been given to me. I blew it all. And then it was all downhill from here. You know, feeling that way, I really didn't feel like there was anything to want to continue on. And so I won't go deep into it, but a whole combination of things all occurred. One, I pulled out an old book. It was an old Wayne Dyer book that I had bought in at least a decade before that and had never opened. And that directed me to, you know, he said, if there's things in your life that aren't going well, the number one thing that he recommended to do is to start a meditation program. And so I started with that. I was talking with a couples counselor that my spouse and I were seeing, that also suggested, when I, you know, expressed how worthless I was feeling, suggested I look at a antidepressant. And it wasn't the first time in my life that somebody had made that suggestion, but it was the first time that I was willing to try. So I did that. I talked to, I got a general practitioner doctor that I hadn't had a regular doctor for over a decade, that discovered, like a thyroid issue was off. So all these things. Also with the Wayne Dyer book, I was reminded that the story that we tell ourselves is really the reality that we are experiencing. And so I recognized that as well, that my perception, if you perceive life to be just, the end of the world, then that's exactly what your experience is. So through all these different realizations and things, I put them into place. It took about 2 weeks to get all of it into place and working. And it was just about the same amount of time. It was just that 2 weeks to where like everything shifted. And I, suddenly realized like I still have like the rest of my life. I can start brand new. I can do anything that I want. So I asked myself, what is it that's important to me? What do I really want to do in this lifetime, in this world? And what came to me is I want to serve humanity. And, it's kind of an irony that I was hating myself for serving tables. And now here is when I went within and asked myself, what's my deepest desire is to serve. That it was almost comical when I figured that out. And so then what happened is I asked myself, well, how do I do that from where I'm at right now? When it came down to it is just recognizing that I have this infinite life within me. And in order to serve humanity, I need to see humanity in front of me as being worthy of being served. And so I made this intention that every single person that sits down in front of me is part of the divine. So it's as if, how would I serve Jesus if he sat down? How would I serve the Buddha? How would I serve, if God was in the shape of a human being, how would I approach that as it from my vocation kind of standpoint? And what this did is it immediately increased my sense of self-worth, that value that I have within. If I am doing something that I see as a benefit to every individual that comes to me, then suddenly like I'm recognizing that which is already within me is a gift to myself and it's a gift to others. So then I would see people and, truly want to hear what they're needing from me. And when people would have, special like food requests, and it would be something that I would, have to check with the kitchen, and I can hear the kitchen already like not wanting to do it. I would use communication and caring and empathy to figure out what it is exactly that this person needs. And then I would ask, the same thing with my coworkers, with my kitchen people, with the other waiters around me. How can I meet the first person's needs, and while at the same time still respecting the needs of those others that are all part of that system? And it's interesting when you start to see from that place, from recognizing your deeper, when Ernest Holmes talks about there's a power in this universe greater than ourselves and that you can use it. When you start trying to open up and come from that place, ideas come, inspiration comes, there's a deeper knowing and even a sense of calm. And I think that's where like the meditation comes in that Wayne Dyer talked about. In any time, like from that place on, when I'm able to remember, so if we're in a place of, doing our everyday stuff, which is typically work for most people, if there's a challenge that comes up, when we remind ourselves that we're part of this bigger thing, and rather than trying to force our way onto it and just, power through it and think, that we can handle it all on our own, when we open up to that deeper thing, then we're able to literally like draw on something. There's a shift that happens. It's almost like, flipping a switch in our minds. And the more that we practice this, recognize it and call upon it, the easier it gets. So as I just shifted that way of where I want to come and how I want to serve, I recognize that the attitude that I show up with has power. And so the way that I arrive at a table or arrive at, whatever job that I'm in, every job that I've had since then, I have that power to either lift somebody up or deflate them a little bit. And it can be very subtle. It can be like I'm appear to be going through completely neutral, but there's always an underlying energy that we have. And that's where this intention really comes in and has great amount of power. So I recently just saw another story very similar. And it was somebody who was working as a janitor in a hospital, and he had that same kind of thing. He was feeling very down on himself and felt like he was also worthless. But then he had a moment to where he recognized, and this is what he shared, is he said, when I am cleaning this toilet, because I clean this bathroom, children are able to come to this building and get treatment for cancer. He recognized that he was contributing to something very big. And without that, without him being there and without his intention to do the best, that a child would not be able to receive what they need. And it's just that simple switch. And it can go all the way up, even if you are somebody who is the CEO of that Fortune 500 company. If you bring this into all that you're being, how can you, bring that deeper sense of good that Ernest Holmes, teaches us about, and that I hope all of us have got glimpses of, that can feel when you're in that position of, what most people, the general consensus of people in the United States would say is the pinnacle of, worthiness. It brings in the humility and a sense of really wanting to serve, a sense of empathy with one another. When we see that we are all pieces and children of that divine, that we serve from that deeper place, and it creates this synergistic effect. So like I was saying, like it might appear to be neutral when I show up at something, but that underlying energy is felt. I'm sure many people have experienced it when you pick up vibes from somebody, and it can be just a subtle little smile that they have, or a subtle, slight amount of what appears to be like annoyance when you ask, for some request. When you're interacting with somebody, you can pick up a sense, and it either lifts you up or it pushes you down a little bit. That's the power that we have, that this really goes out in ripples. So thinking about that, I recognize everybody here, I'm assuming you're here because you're, like me, a spiritual seeker, that we are trying to increase our, felt connection with this thing that's bigger than us. And what happens a lot of times is we get stuck in like our, what we call our Sunday morning mentality, that we get up, we go to our spiritual center on Sunday mornings, and we learn, we practice, we meditate, we breathe, we pray. And then, as I've heard one other person, Brian Johnson, talk about his father when he was growing up, and then get out of the parking lot and want to be the first one out of it, and end up in a kind of a road rage incident just getting out of the parking lot. So that whole spirituality was in that 1 hour time frame on a Sunday morning. But here's this opportunity to where where most people are working, we're awake. Figure you sleep 8 hours, you have 16 hours in the day. So most people spend more than half of their waking hours either working or preparing for work or thinking about work or getting to work. So much of our life is spent in that place. And again, like maybe you're retired, or maybe you're unable to work, but you have something that you spend the bulk of your time at. Are you bringing in this deeper sense of who you are? Like, this is a powerful opportunity to make everything that we do essentially a prayer. Ernest Holmes, the founder of the Science of Mind, tells us that same thing, that all thought is creative. Everything that we're thinking, everything that we hold on to is creative. And so as we recognize that, just by intention and knowing that I'm going to bring my deeper sense of who I am to what I do, that everyone around us is uplifted, and especially ourselves. And so then that sense of self-worth is no longer tied to, our productivity, to how much we earn. That even if all that we do is wake in the morning and stay right where we are and then go back to sleep at night, when we draw our attention into that sense of who we are, then that whole day becomes a prayer. Everything that we do becomes our words and our actions. And it's amazing. Like when I started to tap into that and recognize that I am bringing my best, it opens up possibilities. Doors start to open. When you are out in the world and when you are genuinely and authentically trying to bring the best to somebody else, to help others, it's amazing how people end up wanting to do the same for you. And again, you're like, if that's the whole purpose for doing it, then you've kind of lost that piece, that authentic piece. So I don't want to encourage anybody to go do this in order to see what you can get, but it is a nice, side effect that when you put this out there, that you see people really show up and things that would have never have happened before do. It's almost like this magical thing. And so the last thing that I want to draw our attention to is that we use this saying in the Centers for Spiritual Living of, creating a world that works for everyone. Well, there's all these little tiny pieces that do that through our energy, through what we think, the story we tell ourselves, and our intentions for the future is creating all the time. And so when we are able to bring in such a large portion of our life and do it from a place of deeper meaning, deeper intention to create that positive energy that uplifts others instead of that energy that is pressing others down, then we create this world. That is how this world is creating, and that's how the shift in consciousness occurs. When I discovered that realization that nothing can add on to me, no customer in front of me can make me better or can make me worse than, it was this whole new sense of being. It reminds me of a quote, and I believe it's Eleanor Roosevelt who said, nobody can make you feel inferior without your permission. And so as soon as I was able to tap into that idea that I am bringing that highest and best, that power greater to myself, to my work, when somebody that wasn't feeling that sat down in front of me and wanted to put their feeling of less than onto me, either by saying demeaning things or just being rude or whatever, it no longer shook me. I was not giving them permission to make me feel inferior because I knew that I was drawing on something bigger. And so it's almost this superpower that we all have. And the thing is that superpower returns to us in infinite ways. And then everybody that we touch goes out and those ripples extend. When you're able to send somebody off feeling a little better than before your interaction, then that is power. And in all walks of life. So that is what I would like to request for our homework this week. If this resonates with you, if you are willing to create a whole new spiritual practice, or maybe just deepen the spiritual practice that you've already done. I know a lot of people are years ahead of me on this idea of bringing the sacred to their work. But that's my call, is to ask, how can I make what it is that I do right now be more in alignment and bring more of that infinite nature of the divine into it? That's our work, if you're up for it. So, yeah. So thank you very much.